Good morning and welcome to Morning Coffee with Brigid. I'm Brigid Burke. I'm literally just making it in for 6:30 this morning. I think I woke up at, good morning, Alex. I woke up at like 5:35, 5:40, something like that. Good morning, Jenny. I woke up today and last night I was up quite late trying to get the tarot videos that I normally do put in. Love the shirt. Oh, thank you. Yes, this is my Edward Gorey shirt. And this is that a friend of mine gave me for my birthday, and I love Edward Gorey. He has that really morning. I have the I have this. He has this very macabre sense of humor. I mean, he's known for doing certain things. Good morning, Joanne. But his actual books, the ones that he does, his own cartoon books, are. It was funny. I actually used to work for a book distributor, doing cataloging and metadata and stuff like that. And I remember I had a woman who was in the cubicle next to me, and she was talking to me because she did all the children's cataloging, and she said, "Oh my God, I got this really horrible book." And it was like about the all these colorful little bugs, and then the big black bug comes in and harasses them. So they go and they take a rock and they crush the big black bug. I was taken to Hugh Jackman at first. Oh, okay. Interesting. So it was, yeah, it was. So she was describing this book to me, and she was telling me how it was this horrible children's book, and how could anybody write a children's book? And I said to her, by chance, was it called The Bug Book? And she was like, yeah, I think that's what it's called. I'm like, that's not a children's book. It's really funny, but the Library of Congress was classifying all of Edward Gorey's stuff as children, because he does illustrate a lot of children's books. All of my favorite books, like John Bellairs and all those authors that I loved as a kid, were all illustrated by Edward Gorey. And his illustrations are classic. I mean, it weirded me out. Oh, that's interesting. But Gorey is, I mean, his actual cartoon books are absolutely meant for adults. They are not meant for children, but they're classified as juvenile fiction. And I'm like, well, that's a misnomer. I said, because they're not juvenile, but in any way, shape, or form. And actually, Gorey himself was not like, he did plays on a lot of things, but he was most definitely not like a racist person or a sexist person or anything like that. I said he was just, he just wrote things that were that were very, very shocking, and that were meant to be very, very shocking. So, like this T-shirt's of the Gashly Crumb Tinies, which a lot of people know, and these are one of his alphabets. And this is his alphabet of, it's like A is for Amy who fell down the stairs, B is for Basil assaulted by bears. It's like, it kind of goes through the way all these children have died, Good morning, Melissa. So yeah, it is quite macabre. Like, people who like the Addams Family and stuff probably also like Edward Gorey or might like him. I still have a bunch of Gorey stuff for sale, by the way, for people who are fans over on eBay. I don't like to, I don't like to over push or over promote that, but I've sold about a third of my Gorey stuff. Good morning, Melissa. And so yeah, I'd like to. Yeah, so I don't like to oversell it, but at the same time, it's like, hey, if people are interested in it, they might not even know that it's still there. So I've sold about a third of it. I think I still got about 2/3 of my collection left that I'm just selling off, because at some point I actually would like to move. And right now, there's just certain things that I've held on to for a long time, and I feel like they're not things that I necessarily need to keep forever here. I'm slowly working my way through things. I would like to get to a point where it's just the modicum of furniture, the books I want, my clothes, and my spiritual things, shall we say, and then pretty much try to get rid of everything else. So I'm kind of working my way down. I did finally hear back from lawyers about my Slovak passport, so we're going to see whether or not I wasn't clear on eligibility from them, so they're supposed to give me a reply on that, and. But I was glad to hear back from somebody about it, because the one company I was talking to never wrote back. So this lawyer did finally write back to me, and they just needed to know some information about my great grandparents. So we'll see where that goes, and if they tell me that I'm eligible or not. Yeah, and as you can see, it's a little bit darker in here. I'm thinking that as we get into towards the winter months here anyway, I realize people who might be in Australia or elsewhere, they're going to be going into the summer months. I don't know if I'm going to have to adjust the time of this because I'll be up at 6:30 and it will be pitch black in here. And one of the reasons that I'm up at this hour is because I like to watch the sun come up. So I might end up moving the live stream to like an hour later in the winter time, which might actually be fine for everybody because maybe nobody wants to get up at that hour. But of course, if you're getting up for work, you might be getting up at that time anyway. So I don't know. We might try to find a median spot, like 7. We'll see how it goes. But I might just adjust it because the idea is I like to work in natural light and not have to have a whole bunch of lights on me, for these morning things. And I do like to see the sun come up, so it's just one of my things in the morning. So we'll see that as it comes. But interestingly, when I was talking about emptying out my gory stuff, so actually that ended up being kind of a good segue into the thing I wanted to talk about today. Because when I did when I get up in the morning, I do my grounding rituals, I do my protection rituals, and then I will call up my guides. And then in addition to everything else that we talk about in the morning, I also ask them, well, I'm doing a live stream, I'm doing something. So is there something in particular that you feel that people should hear about? And yeah, the topic that came up this morning was the topic of emptiness and what to do with emptiness. Okay. Because what frequently happens is that we get into a space where we are, where we may have done a lot of work. Okay, I think there's a lot of people, and I know certainly there's a lot of people on here who are doing a lot of work. There's a lot of clearing out. We talk a lot about, like I said, this is transition life coaching. So we're talking about people who have made transitions. Like, yeah, I've cleaned out, I've cleared out, I'm getting rid of the old, I'm releasing, getting rid of the clutter. And now I've gotten to a point where, like if I had this whole room and then I emptied this whole room out, right? It's an empty space. Now we're talking about an empty space, possibly in a physical sense, because sometimes emptying out our physical space becomes a reflection of what's going on in our psychological space. Sometimes that's how we do things. Like if you walk around and if you feel like your house is messy or cluttered or something, sometimes that can affect your state and make you feel like, yeah, now I feel messy, I feel cluttered. I know I happen to be that way. I don't know. I know that there's some people who have that kind of thing. Some people actually like to have that clutter around. Like I said, I think I was talking about a coworker that I had and apparently, where I had moved her from the office from the guy who was just the total opposite. Again, total neatnik, didn't want anything around. And she just, she would acquire and accumulate interesting stuff, or articles and things. And I completely understand that to some degree. I used to because when having worked in a library for so many years, I would be going through things. I'd be going through periodicals, and then when I'd be shelving things, and you find so much stuff by serendipity. That's just something I think that gets kind of lost today in an online environment. I mean, of course, we could be web searching and I think we call it kind of going down the rabbit hole, right? We kind of go into different places and say, oh, I saw this. I wonder what that's about. And I wonder what that's about. So we have, I guess, some version of serendipity. But there's something about being in a library and just browsing a particular section. I know all the classifications, all the major classifications. I taught them for many years. But if I know that there's a certain area, like, oh, I'm interested in looking, I'm in a public library and I want to look at art books, right? I know that I want to look in the 740s. So I will go over there and maybe I have an idea in mind. Maybe I have even a specific number of an artist that I want to look at. But then as I start to look through, then I'm like, oh, but I found this over here and I found this. I mean, you'll find that when you go even into a bookstore, there's a section that they will have. And the categorizations, it's always fascinating to look at the kind of categories that bookstores and things will set up. Because not everybody does things the same. And what kind of materials they will put into that. So if you're somebody who's interested in the kind of, spiritual kind of stuff, for instance, some places will lump religion and philosophy. They'll put religion and philosophy together, often. And they will often be next to what they think they either call New Age spirituality, or they will just call it spiritual, or they will have, and it will be a variety of everything from books on witchcraft to ghost hunting to ghost stories to astrology books, like literally they just kind of lump everything in together. And I even though I do like going into an old school bookstore, like a Barnes and Noble. It used to be, I think Borders is now completely dead. That was the first one that had the whole idea of the bookstore cafe thing. And Barnes and Noble does do that now, and I think there's only one Barnes and Noble. I mean, there might be two of them that I know of, but I don't tend to get there very often, and oftentimes when I go there, everything there is just kind of the mass market stuff, and I'm like, yeah, I'd be looking for something. I want the used bookstores. I want something a little more obscure. But the thing is that I understand the idea of when you find all this interesting stuff, you think you're not going to find it again, so you kind of accumulate it and you put it away. So I understand from one perspective this woman and the way that she would put things. But on the other hand, it was like when we moved her into a different office, it literally, that office, that it just grew with just all kinds of stuff, books that were being discarded and newspapers. I mean, and the floor began to pile up with stuff again. Some people just live amid clutter, and it doesn't affect them, and somehow like not having that clutter feels like empty to them. I don't know. I don't always want to say that people who like clutter are people who are, I don't know, there could be some kind of I don't want to psychoanalyze them, let's put it that way. But I know I'm a person who, while I do like my stuff, I like my comforts. My sister and I have conversations about this. She and I are quite different in a lot of ways, but we do share an aesthetic. Like when she walks into my house, she's like, yeah, your aesthetic is what I want in my house. Because, well, she's Virgo. So, it's that earthy thing. I like things that are earthy. I like something that makes me feel like I'm in like 1970s, like, living room somewhere, which some people think is appalling, especially like, look at some of the colors I have. I like, this is the kind of thing that I like. People who have seen my downstairs on my other live stream, I mean, that looks like kind of like almost a big library type room, but that's what I like. My TV is actually on a bookshelf, because you're the same. Yeah. Well, yeah, you're a Taurus, so that completely makes sense. My what you call it? My television, it actually sits on a bookshelf. And I remember reading that somewhere, that if you don't want, I've lived in so many places where, you basically structure the entire room around where the cable is, like if you're going to hook up your thing to cable, or to the internet or to whatever it is now. And so everything ends up kind of being, your decor ends up kind of flowing around that. But for me, I had read somewhere like, no, if you don't want, if the TV is not the most prominent thing in the room, then don't make it the centerpiece of the room. Like put it on a bookshelf, which I was like, oh, I could do that with these, because I got these. The oak bookcases I have downstairs came from the Morristown Library, and they were gifted to me by Dr. James Frazier, a guy who is now, he's passed away since then. And interestingly, again, like religiously, he and I were completely the opposite. He was a Plymouth Brethren, and anybody who knows anything about Aleister Crowley knows that Aleister Crowley was raised Plymouth Brethren, and his being raised Plymouth Brethren is what made him very anti-Christian and going to a Plymouth Brethren school, because they are very, very strict. They're kind of probably, I think they're more Scottish in their origins, but they're very, very fundamentalist in the way that they see things. But Jim was like, he was kind of like a man of the world. Like he wasn't somebody who was really like in a narrow thing. He was just very, very much, he read his Bible every morning and stuff, but he would say things to me because he knew what I was interested in, and he'd go, now, Bridge, I very much worry about the state of your soul. I'm like, yeah, I'm fine, don't worry about me. Because he had bought some very bizarre books, like for the religion section, that after he passed away, I'm like, okay, weed, because to me, they just weren't, there was no academic credibility to them. I'm like, this is a college library. We should not be having this kind of proselytizing kind of stuff in here. But that's really the only thing. For the most part, I mean, he was a scholar. I mean, he rescued so much stuff, so much of literary stuff from the Soviet Union. He had somebody who in Riga, in Latvia, who he would manage to get into the apartments when he would be in the Soviet Union of like dramatists and these people where their apartment hadn't been touched in 40 years. He would manage to break in, take the stuff, mail it to Riga, and then they would mail it to the United States, and then he would donate it to either a big university or to the Library of Congress. Because he never did this stuff for money. This wasn't for him to get money for himself. Because he said, no, this is the literary heritage of the world, and people need to know about this. It can't be, he didn't want any of it to be forgotten. So he would kind of smuggle things out of places where he felt like they would either be thrown away or thrown in an archive where nobody would see it ever again. And then he would, that's why he got very mad at the university where I worked, because a lot of the special things that he had brought in, they were like, oh, well, we're going to sell those to make money for the school. And he was like, oh, no, you're not. He actually came back, took all the stuff, had us de-accession it, and he would send it away. Whether he was technically allowed to do that or not, I remember the university librarian at the time, he's like, I'm going to look at it this way. He's the one who brought them into the collection, so I'm going to say he has the right to do what he wants with them. But he says, but I don't want to know anything about what he's doing. But he didn't sell them. He would donate them to different libraries. So anyway, Jim and I were quite different, but Jim is the one who gave me the bookcases because that was kind of a payment. I was doing work for him when he was trying to put together a book on Latvian poster art and stuff, and he had no clue about technology, so I would go and I would convert files for him and I would do stuff at his house. And sometimes he paid me in money, but a lot of times he would pay me in stuff, so bookcases, valuable books, things like that. So, but we got along really well. I think I told the story about when I was getting divorced, and my husband worked at the same place that I did at the time we were splitting up. And when my husband had gone into, I had quit there by that point, but when my husband went and saw Dr. Fraser and said to him, oh, well, that we were getting divorced, he just looked at my husband and said, oh, I'm so sorry for your loss. It was really funny. And my husband wouldn't know. He's like, what, he didn't have, I said, well, that's the way he sees it. He saw my husband as kind of a waste, and he was just kind of like, it's like, yeah, you can do better than that. So it was, anyway, what does this have to do with empty space? Well, I feel like we do things to kind of, we clear spaces out, and then the tendency is once we clear something out, we have to fill it again. That there has to be something in the space. Now, psychologically, the way that can work is if we do a lot of work, if we do a lot of meditative work, okay, meditation is hard because it involves calming the mind. Now, there's a fallacy that it means you've got to turn the mind off entirely, which you cannot do. I mean, maybe there's people who can do it, or you can do it for a short period of time. If you can do it for a short period of time, if you can totally make the mind kick out, then that's great. But generally, most people can't do that for more than maybe a couple of seconds, because immediately, if you're in a state, if you're meditating and you sit there and you think, and all of a sudden you reach a moment where kind of like your thoughts just drift away, somehow you're going to go, oh, look, my thoughts have just drifted away, and now your thoughts are back in it again, right? As soon as you think about it, you're back in it. As soon as you try to look at it with the eyes of that consciousness, then I deleted 20 seconds. I created 20 seconds of Zen videos for that reason. Yeah, and that's it. Sometimes people can only do 20 seconds. You can't, it's not, the mind runs and runs. I know Sharada Devi, who was the wife of Sri Ramakrishna, he of course is a great, a saint. He was in the Kali temple, and he is one of the great Hindu saints that we have, and his wife is too. And she had said at one point, I remember reading her book, and she was saying to people, she said, because when she had her students, people would have a mala, right, to do meditation. We think of it as a rosary in the West, and a lot of times we think of that as being connected with Catholicism, right, where everyone has 20 seconds to recenter. Yes, absolutely. And but if you do a rosary, if you're in the Catholic Church, it's like, oh, okay, you have so many Hail Marys and so many Our Fathers or whatever, but as you do the rosary, and then there's the stations at each one and so forth. But in the East mala, you have malas, and a lot of people try to wear those. They kind of try to wear them as jewelry, and it's like, well, no, that's not any more than rosary beads. I guess Madonna was the first one to wear rosary beads as jewelry, but theoretically speaking, they're not meant to be worn as jewelry. They're meant to be tools, as aids. So therefore you can close your eyes and you can just feel I have a mala over here. I'm probably not going to walk over and grab it, but I have a couple of them. And generally the Hindu malas are made from rudraksha, which are seeds, because those are connected with they're called Shiva's tears. They're connected with Lord Shiva. And they're usually 64 usually on a mala. Now, some of them could be longer, but the idea, is it 64? Might be 54, because, and then you have one big one at the center. And what it is you go around them twice, because usually it's 108 repetitions of a particular mantra or a particular name. So you just hold it, and then when you hit the larger bead, you know that you've hit a center point or you've hit an end point. Okay, so that's kind of the way they are. He did a 21-day sadhana to Tara. It was great. It actually forced me to focus. Interesting. Was this the Buddhist Tara that you did this to, like white Tara or green Tara? Is that who you who are working with? Just curious, because there's also a Hindu Tara who's different. So interested to know which one it was. But yes, you mean the Buddhist one then? And actually, Tara is a goddess very much connected to compassion, as a lot of the bodhisattvas are, and I could see where she could have that kind of an effect. And that's the reason you get initiated into mantra, and oftentimes your mantra is something, if you get a personal mantra with initiation, you don't share that mantra with anybody. You don't tell anybody what it is. So you work with that, and that is your own connection. That's kind of your own automatic connector. But the idea of doing it, the reason you have a mantra to begin with, the reason you have sound, is because your mind can't deal with empty space. Okay, we don't, and 21 aspects, a dark side too, which I loved. Yes, well, the thing is, the dark side's probably akin to the Hindu Tara, and that's fascinating. That to me, when I try to explain Tantra to people, I always explain it in terms of Hindu Tara. That'll be for another day. So what we have here is we have this this idea of trying to do things to, really, as I think I've said this before, there's like a tricking of the mind. You have to trick the mind into shutting up, basically. And that's what a lot of meditation is, because your mind is going to trick you all the time. I think I've said this before about Alan Watts, where he has said that you will have a situation where we always think that if we are focused on something spiritual, that somehow that's higher. Like, okay, because I'm focused on a higher thing and I'm not focused on this mundane thing, that's putting me in a more spiritual place. But that isn't necessarily true. Because I think the metaphor that Watts used was, if you go into, if there's a thief that breaks into the house, and if you consider this mind the thief, right, then the police come in to kind of control the thief or get the thief out. So as soon as he hears the police coming, he goes up a level. And then if the police go up to next level, then he goes up another level, like, assuming you have a multi-story house, but going up and up and up. And the thing is, eventually the thief is and the trickster is hiding out in your higher self space, right? It's hiding out in that space. So that's why he says the person who wants enlightenment is the same person who wants candy bars. That was the way that he put it. It's the same thing that's gone up a level. It's a want. I want. That sounds like one of those Peanuts cartoons. The teachers in the Peanuts cartoons. Want. But that's just it. So that's why often they will talk about detaching it from desire. But again, when we put too much mental energy into like, okay, am I doing this right? Am I doing it this way? Am I doing it that way? When you put too much mental, then it's almost like, then you kind of get yourself stuck in this endless loop. But when we finally achieve some kind of an emptiness, and oftentimes this has to do with a life situation, and this is why when we have life crises of different types, this is where they can become important in this way, because they're almost like these little earthquakes that are created, or maybe big earthquakes that are created in our lives, that kind of tear things down and make a space and make us see things perhaps clearly for ourselves for the first time. They can have that effect. Now it's, but a lot of times if we know that we've transitioned out of something, say, okay, we were in a job for 30 years and now we're not going to do that job anymore, just for example. And now we're free. And it's like, but now people are like, well, I don't know what to do. Maybe I should just get another job. We don't really know what to do with that space. Because the space is unsettling. I don't know if you've ever seen, I remember reading an article about, there's a particular chamber that was created. Again, it's some kind of scientific experimentation. I don't know exactly what it was, but it was basically a chamber that was entirely silent. Okay, now most of the time, like I could say, oh, I'm going to sit here in silence, but like even if you listen to my Azrael videos, you can hear noise in the background and stuff because I'm not far from a highway. Not when I say highway, I don't mean a major highway, but still, you know, there's roars of trucks and people with bad mufflers and stuff kind of going up and down the road. It could be people driving out here. It could people be outside with their lawnmowers and weed whackers and whatever else. I mean, even if the window's closed, and these are supposed to be, by the way, soundproof windows. They're not. You're still going to get a little bit of a noise from somewhere. You hear the noise of my fan right now because it's got like a little wobble to it. Always has since I've lived here. But you're always going to have some kind of noise. Some people have tinnitus, so they always have this kind of noise in their ears. But to walk into a space that is absolutely, absolutely silent, they said the effect that has on you psychologically, and then imagine if you made it dark as well as silent. That is, even though you might compare it to, say, the darkness of the womb, right? But even in the darkness of the womb, you would have like the mother's heartbeat or something, you know, for a child, if you're thinking about a child in the womb. Because a lot of people will say, oh no, people want to retreat to those kind of spaces because there's kind of this mother energy to it. You know, you're in this space where you feel, it's like you feel reconnected to the mother in some way, or you feel that safety of having, of being in that womb, in that safe space. But this would be different from that. This would be more like what they talk about when they talk about liminal spaces. The whole phenomenon of the back rooms and how unsettling it is to be in a space that's just completely empty. And I don't know about you, but when I've moved house, or I've moved out of an apartment, or moved out of a different place, and all the furniture is taken out, and you turn around and you look at it, doesn't look like the same house that you lived in. There's just something about it. There's either almost a a nostalgia, or a poignancy, maybe is the right word, or there may even be an unsettled feeling, like you'll clear everything out and go, I had no idea this space was this big. Like, you know, you always kind of have this thing where you're like, you know, once you clear space, you realize how much there is. And there's like a vastness to it that can be a bit unsettling to us, where we don't feel, and I think that in meditation too, I mean, even so, like the idea of having a totally empty mind, it's unsettling to us. Our consciousness wants to be running the show, wants to be involved. And when you're in a space that's completely silent, it's like, there's just something about that, because in that silence, all that stuff that we kind of try not to focus on suddenly becomes very loud and can become very clear in a figurative sense. There's that march of thoughts, that march of stuff that can come up in a space where it can just echo very, very loudly. There's no TV, there's no phone, there's no other noise to drown it out. And I think that might also be part of our problem with aloneness, the idea of people being alone. I just think it's interesting. There have been a lot of comments in politics lately about women who don't have children, like childless women and so forth. And again, I said, you know, whatever else that may mean or what that may be about, it's interesting how the idea of, say, the feminine by themselves in particular, is problematic and scary to certain people. And I feel like almost like there's a connection there, because women tend to be connected with that vastness of potential, that vastness of space. Because if people do think about the feminine in terms of childhood, okay, the person who doesn't have children in a certain sense is an empty void. The womb is an empty void, right? It's not something that is filled with something. And so there becomes this attitude of, you know, that there feels like there's something threatening about that. But the empty space is also, if we want to look at it that way, is also the space of possibility. That's the space where we create. And I think what the message was that a lot of times people get in that space, and similarly, you know, just like we have a hard time dealing with old wounds and things, it's kind of like or our constant need to be productive, right? To be productive all the time. I think it comes out of a space where we are, where out of that kind of fear of that emptiness. Like that emptiness is going to mean, the same emptiness also of like not having our stuff. Do you ever have dreams about, I know I've had dreams in the past where I've had things like, like my purse that has like everything in it, like my credit cards, my ID, everything, just suddenly disappears. And then it's like, oh my gosh, like, like I'm kind of being guided to this space, but I have to go back and find all those things connected with my identity. And yeah, so when there's a part of you that kind of goes away, this is what happens during initiation ceremonies too. If you read a lot of anthropological literature on rites of passage and things like that, there's this sense of when you're passing through that space, because you're not the person you were, there's no familiarity there. You're moving into something that is empty, and there's no template. It's like, okay, I have to figure out how to do this differently. I have to learn what this new space is. Or I have to be in that possibility, or just being in that space. Because if we're actually able to just be in that space, you can actually have a clarity about everything, about how everything is. But a lot of times, again, the mind jumps in because it wants to, well, what is this? I'm trying to interpret what's happening. What's going on here? What's going on there? What is this? Does this mean this? Does this mean that? Like the mind wants to do all this stuff. So you're talking a little bit about Zen, Joanne, and it's like, yeah, that I think that's kind of the point of it, that there's this. I had the Hanged Man card coming up for a lot of people in a lot of readings, and also in the readings that I was doing this weekend, or really the last couple of days. And there's the energy there of, it only says not only having to sacrifice something, but having to look at the bigger picture. And a lot of times we say, yeah, I need to look at the bigger picture, but we don't. Looking at the bigger picture may be emptying all of that other stuff and then saying, okay, now we're going to look at this. You can stand on your head and look at it. Okay, that's one way to do it. But it may also be like, if I emptied all of this other stuff out, now what does this look like? And what are the possibilities here? And sometimes it's a case of we don't need to sit down and pre-plan and organize and think about, oh, what's this going to do? And is that going to make me money? And is it going to be this? And is it going to be that? We just kind of get into that space and maybe see what comes out of it almost organically. But it's a very hard thing to do. And so it's not something that people can kind of do for long periods of time. But I think it's the approach that we have to the emptiness. We feel threatened by that emptiness because we think it means the destruction of everything that we are. From dust you came, into dust you shall return, right? The womb that produces you, in terms of, we think of the Earth Mother, is also the womb that takes your body when you die. Like, there's that idea of that vastness of nothingness. And but frequently, like, the nothingness card will come up, and interestingly, that shows up as a Hierophant. That's the higher spiritual commitment card, is the one about nothingness. How do you work in nothingness? How do you work in a space where we're not thinking about things in terms of past, present, future? How do you think about things when you're just in the moment? And a lot of times, we may be in life situations when we get out of established, comfortable patterns. This is about being in the moment. And but I think the reason a lot of people have a hard time with it is because it's and oh my goodness, okay, I'm sorry, I'm just pulling our cards today. It's a very scary thing. This reading kind of makes another point about it here, which is interesting. I said, oh my goodness, because there are 3 out of 4 aces in this reading for today. So, which I was like, wow, I have not seen that in this deck. Okay, so our first card is our Knight of Wands energy. It's the intensity card, okay? We have an intensity. That's a piece of the puzzle too, because we energetically have something that goes on where we're very high energy people. A lot of us are very high energy people. I think, as I mentioned with human design, probably 85% of people are generator or manifesting generator. Not everybody is. Some people are projectors, some people are reflectors, but that is the majority, and that is worker energy. Work. We have, our bodies are kind of moving. We want to move. We want to do things, and that's another thing that can make it difficult to just be in a space where you're quiet and you're not doing anything, or where you're facing no thing. You're like, no, I gotta be doing something. Surely I've got the laundry to do, and I've got the dishes to do, and I've got to go take care of this, and I got to manage that, and I find myself doing that every morning. I get up and I'm like, okay, what's the list for today? What needs to be cleaned up? What do I need to do? And then sometimes my guides are like, just stop, just whatever, don't do that. And again, some days I do need to do that, but other days, sometimes when I'm trying to process something, it's like, don't distract yourself with all this other stuff. Like, work on what you're working on, right? And again, exactly what I said about the void, the inner feeling, possibilities. This dealing with that empty space allows us to kind of fly, we can deal with the void by kind of almost flying above it, and kind of looking at it from a vantage point, like you were a drone or you were in a helicopter or something. Look at it from a different vantage point, from the higher vantage point, so that you can see the big picture. Now, seeing the big picture doesn't mean you can see all the tiny details, but you can see the big picture. And the external feeling of which we are aware, here's the Ace of Swords. We have the consciousness card, and we've talked about this card before. New ideas, new ways of thinking. So out of that void, out of that space, internally, we're now, as we feel flee? It was funny. We're fleeing, right? Maybe that's a Freudian slip. But we feel free to be able to kind of get above and to see things. So when you start looking at it from the realm of possibility, that's when the new stuff comes in. That's when the new ideas come in. This is new consciousness. This is a stark clarity of what's there. Okay? And our advice card is the Ace of Pentacles, the maturity card. And I think what this is assuring people is that even in these empty spaces, there's still a certain amount of maturity. Part of the problem too is that I think we tend to make ourselves very, very small. Like when we're doing our day-to-day things, it's kind of like, oh, well, I'm busy with this, or I have to do that. We tend to forget how vast the soul is, and we tend to forget what kinds of gifts we have. We tend to forget what we've accomplished because we're so focused on maybe what's lacking in the present or what's not there, and we don't. Another part of the bigger picture is just trying to figure out what it is, what we have to work with here. What resources do we have? That's the other thing. It's like writing a resume with somebody or a CV. You sit down with somebody and they'll be like, oh, I don't know. I want this job, but I have no experience. And so I say, well, what have you done? And then as you start to go through, people realize, oh yeah, well, I did that. Well, I never thought to tell anybody about that. Oh, I never thought to mention this. We have all kinds of things like that where we might be so laser focused. Same reason when people go to university and they say, well, yeah, I'm really interested in this subject, but I have to major in this because that's the job that I want. And it's like, no, that's not how this works. You have a broad base of skills that can be applied to something. And it's how do you make use of those skills, right? And so the maturity is like, yeah, being at a point, you're starting from a place that is where you can be secure in who you are. In spite of the nothingness, you have this, there's like that centeredness, okay? There's that groundedness, that centeredness, where you're in the center of it and say, okay, I'm in this. And the reality is that scary space is the space you've been in all the time. It's just now your vision has cleared and you can see it. And the upshot is that you can see possibilities, right? But again, it's the intensity of our energy that can make us nervous in there, right? And the outcome is the Ace of Cups, going with the flow. So so there's just definitely this sense of when you're in a new space, allow yourself to go with the flow of the new space. Don't try to interpret the new space. You can think about what you still have, because we're never, if you are alive and you exist, you're never completely without anything. But sometimes there's just that need to kind of be still and try to look at things from a broader vantage point. Like if you're in a smaller space, see what the bigger space is, and see what the bigger space is of you. I think one of the things that we learn from the emptiness is just how vast our own soul is, and just how how wondrous and accomplished we all are. We only tend to think of ourselves in terms of the job that we did, or this one thing or that thing. We don't think about the vastness of our existence, which is, I mean, and people who delve more into spiritual practices will recognize that it's not just what, me, Brigid Burke, what I'm doing here, and this, it's also whoever else I've been across any quantum lifetimes or whatever. There's everything that you are. It's your own Vishvarupa, so to speak. It's the many faces of you, and that can be very unsettling for people, because you kind of just say, no, I just want to focus on this one thing. And eventually you do refocus onto the one thing. But when you're in a new space, you need to be open to those new possibilities. And that intense energy needs to be applied to the possibilities. And that means that you don't want to take too much control of the process initially. You can feel secure to a certain degree in who you are and what you've learned. But for the new ideas to come in, you need to kind of go with the flow here, okay? So, yeah, interesting today. I just thought that was fascinating that we've got, all of these, in the middle of this intensity, we have all of these new beginnings and all of these new possibilities. So interesting. I think this is going to be a time when, and that may be part of the whole slowing down theme that we've been talking about all week, because if we're go, and our mind is running, I don't have time for this, I got to worry about this, we're not able to slow down enough to see the bigger picture and to see what's going on here, because we may be putting a lot of effort into a certain direction and then later realize, maybe I just wasted my effort, maybe I shouldn't have gone that, maybe I should have gone a different way. But a lot of it's because we need to think about when we're in that void, when we're in that space, to focus on what's this new thing that's waiting to be born here. But of course, there's also the attitude of the idea that something may take some time to be born too. So yeah, just kind of spending that time thinking about possibility rather than being afraid about what might be in the scary dark. Just say like, well, what's the possibility here? What's the thing that wants to be created? Okay. I hope that makes sense for everybody. I think that was kind of the topic that came up today. That's the, whatever I've had to say about it, but yeah, kind of an interesting reading for today. Thank you. And I want to thank you guys for joining me. We're just about 1:15, and yeah, those videos, people, Aries through Virgo, waiting for the tarot videos, those are going to be up. Oh, you're welcome, Melissa. And thank you. You're welcome, Joanne and Alex. Very relatable. Thank you. Okay, cool. Thank you. And good. And I'm glad. Like I said, I'm glad that it is. I have those videos up. And again, anybody who wants to join me for the Dream Workshop, it is this Saturday. So so definitely check that out on my site. I know I've got a few people who have said that they're going to, and they have not registered yet. So I just want to make sure that people who want to actually do. So all of you have a great Wednesday. It's the last day of July. I was thinking today was Tuesday, and I'm like, oh, well, when Wednesday comes, and I'm like, wait, it is Wednesday. So, I still have this problem with time right now, but you're doing Chiron. Awesome. Yes, you're doing Chiron, and I think Sam is also. So, that'll be that one, but I've contacted certain people in the Dream group, so we'll see if we can get them to come back. I'm figuring I'm going to have at least 3 or 4 for that one. So, so all of you have a great last day of July. I'm signing up for Chiron this weekend. Great, awesome. So I'm going to have 3 of you guys. Then that'll be awesome. And that's in a couple weeks from now. So the 17th, I think it is. And that will be a super interesting class. So I'm doing that one. That other one too, the long one. Oh, you're going to do the intuitive development class. Awesome. That would be great. Yeah, that's really interesting. I've taken 3 or 4 different intuitive psychic development classes, and I know pretty much how they go and how they run, and I feel like I'm at a point with the work that I'm doing that I feel qualified to run one. Because before, it's like, yes, I'd read tarot for years and stuff, and I don't know, though. I kind of always felt like I was been too cerebral about how I approached everything, and I'm like, okay, I need to loosen up, open up a little bit more. So I finally feel like I'm at a point where you know, I'm not a, you know, I'm not a Cindy Kaiser or Chip Coffee, but at the same time, I'm like, I feel like there's enough there that I can share with people and help people with. So yeah, so that's going to be fun. I can't wait to get started on that. Thank you guys again so much for joining me. Have a great rest of your day, and I will see you tomorrow morning. Take care. Bye-bye.